Hey everybody, welcome back. And man, do I have some Spawn News Network news to share with you this week. We got a big shakeup in the Spawn universe. We had several titles come out this week on New Comic Book Day, and I'm going to give you my take and my firsthand experience on the New York City Comic Con. I hadn't been there before. Last year was my first time, so if you're ready, come on in, sit on down, and let's talk some Spawn. All right, before we get started, I know a lot of people are coming out and addressing, the issue of like AI. I just want to let you know where I stand on it. I don't think AI has any place in comic books whatsoever. Now the reason behind that is now I will tell you that when AI started to become kind of popular, um, the in my search engine on my phone, had a little thing said you could type in a prompt and create a picture. So on my Instagram, I got this wild idea one time. I said, I wonder what it would look like if Spawn, K7 Letha took over like, Pikachu. So I made I called it a Spawnachu, and I put that up on my Instagram, and, I thought it was, funny, whatever, generated picture. But then, as I heard more and more people talking about it, and the artists, saying how it's, stealing their work and things like that, I started to have a different take on it. So, I've since, taken that post down a while ago. So I don't, generate, any of my own art. I'm not an artist. So I feel that's up to the artists. But the reason that I feel that AI has no place in comic books, at least for me, this is my opinion, is because when I'm reading these comics, when I'm looking at the art, I'm thinking about the artist or the writer, sitting down and writing that story, or the writer, the strokes, the pen strokes, or the mistakes they made and had to erase and change. A real person actually created this. If if you create an image, if you type in a prompt and it spits out an image for you, there's no soul, there's no character. It's to me it's meaningless. There's nothing behind it. Like, when Todd McFarlane sits down, I know that it says, he's the writer on that book. I know that, that came out of, him. He thought up this story, whether it took him, 5 minutes or he spent weeks on it. A real person created this, and it's something that you can connect with. If, you just let, something like that be created, there's nothing behind it. There's no meaning. To me, there's no point. It's like it's pictures and words on a page, but there's nothing behind it. So that's the reason that I don't feel that anything AI has any place in comics. Whether it's writing or art. I think most of it looks bad. It looks terrible. So you're not going to see that on my page. I'm not going to be using you know these. I'm not going to be creating these like AI generated thumbnails or the background on my page here. I'm just not going to do it. So it's going to be just plain old me. So that's what you get. So I mean, let me know what you guys think. Do you guys think that AI belongs in comics? I and I've already told you before that TMP has decided internally not to put out that the AI cover that won the Spawnuary cover contest. So we're not going to be seeing that cover. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. New Comic Book Day, we kind of had a heavy week. We had 3 titles come out. We had Sam and Twitch Case Files with Thomas Healy and Von Randall on the interiors. Thomas is like right in the middle of his story arc. It's getting really good. Um, for those of you that are following along, something from Sam and Twitch's past has kind of came back to haunt them, and they're trying to battle that. But it looks like they've kind of got a break in the case. So looking forward to see where this goes. Then we also had Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger with, Jimmy Palmiotti, and this issue still has Patrick Reynolds on interiors, and he has said that he's going to step away from interiors and just do covers, but for now we still have him on interiors. And in this one, I guess we get to find out if Tobias is actually, a team player or not, so to speak. So, great story. Still loving this one. Still up there at the top for me. And then finally, we have Rat City this week with Erica Schultz on the story, and Z Carlos on the interior. Great story. We get a little bit of a backstory in this issue. We have a special guest, so to speak. So be sure to check that one out. As far as all three titles go for the week, I can't really say that I have a favorite cover because there wasn't really an A and B. Sam and Twitch has the normal cover, and then they do a Virgin variant. Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger has the B cover is a black and white, and then Rat City is the same. It's a Rat City cover, not the same, but it also has a black and white version for its B cover. So all the covers are pretty standard. We did also get our first trade paperback for Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger. So if you haven't picked up Deadly Tales of the Gunslinger, be sure to pick up the trade paperback so you can get caught up on the story. It's a great story. I know you guys think I'm being a little bit biased because Gunslinger is my favorite, but no, it truly is a good story. Jimmy Palmiotti is a great storyteller, so be sure to pick that up. It is now time for your Spawn News Network news. All right, so I think I have finally landed on a title for this segment. I think I'm going to call it SUNN, which is going to stand for Spawn Universe Network News. I think it has a nice ring to it. So from here on out, moving forward, next week we're going to have the Sun. All right, the Spawn Universe Network News. Okay, so now we had a big shakeup at TMP this week. I first found out about it when I was shown an article from the Popverse. It looks like, from the way that the article is written, that it does not say that Brett Booth is leaving TMP. It says that he has moved over to another creative team, and apparently that's with Todd. But, for whatever reason, this was, the way that the article is written, like this wasn't planned, like something happened, so they've had to move some things around. And apparently, like in the main story, they're going to do like a time jump when the new writer takes over. So things are going to get, moved around. So I'm actually kind of, excited and nervous at the same time to see what's going to happen. As far as like McFarlane has been writing the main title. He's been writing Gunslinger, and I know he's been writing The Scorched. So he says that he is pulling away from his writing duties, and he's going to be focused more on art, which, he hasn't done in quite a while. He hasn't, actually broke out his pens and done any real art for quite some time now. So we're going to get to see some more Todd art, apparently. I just don't know in what. But as far as the main title goes, we're going to have Matthew Rosenberg on writing, and Steven Segovia is going to take over on art, and I believe that is starting with the June issue. Then also, like I said, things are getting moved around. On King Spawn, we're also going to have Matthew Rosenberg on writing, and Thomas Nachlik is going to be on the art. So another change up there. Now, The Scorched, right now, Thomas Healy is doing, like I mentioned earlier, he's doing Sam and Twitch, The Case Files, but then he's also going to take over the writing on The Scorched. So, you know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like that TMP needs a new editor. Huh? I can put my email right here on the screen. Just, send me an email, call me. You guys need a hand. Assistant editor, just let me know. I'm here to help. Because I have noticed that, and I don't know if you guys have noticed, but since Healy took over, the writing of, like Black Ritual and the Sam and Twitch Case Files, and now The Scorched, we have not been getting any spawning grounds in the books. I mean, he's a busy guy. He's got a lot on his plate. So, you need a hand? Give me a call. Hey, I'm right here. All right. So, waiting on that phone call, by the way. Email, whatever. All right. And then lastly, we have the Gunslinger. Now, the gunslinger, the writing duties are going to be taken over by Erica Schultz, and Carlo Barbary is going to, be on the art, but Erica Schultz is taking over for the story. Now, nothing has been said about Rat City, so it looks to me like issue 25 is going to be the last issue of Rat City. It had a great run. It was definitely, a new take. They've said that they're not going to be, forgetting about those characters, but, it looks like Rat City just didn't make it. So I'm really curious to see, how these writing teams are gonna, pull this off and see where things go. I'm partial to Gunslinger, so Todd has been writing it this whole time, so I'm excited and kind of nervous for a new writer to take over. So, but I know she's going to do great. I really like Rat City, so I'm looking forward to to what's coming. Let me know what you think. What do you think of the way things have how the boat's been kind of rocked, and what do you think that Todd and Brett could possibly be working on that was so important that they had upend things like this? So let me know what you think. For the New York City Comic Con, a group of us kind of got together. It ended up being myself, Brandon from Mad Viking Comics, Steve, who goes by Punk G42, Ty, Spawn Hunter, Adam from over there at Spawn's Universe over on Reddit. He's the admin over there. And Jeff Monk. Yes, the Jeff Monk. All right. We all made these plans to go to the New York City Comic Con. New York City Comic Con is the biggest one that I have ever been to. I was wanting to go this year. Well, actually, sorry, last year. It was last year now. Because Daniel Henriquez and Jonathan Glapian had just put out The Curse of Shirley Johnson. I fell in love with the book, and I wanted to get some signed copies so that I could do a giveaway on my page. Well, Daniel doesn't live in the United States, and it just so happened that he was going to be in New York for the New York City Comic Con, so I wanted to make sure that I was there so that I could get these books signed. So, it worked out to where, I was able to go. We had, the group of us, we had these t-shirts made up. We all had, it just says Spawn fans, the New York City Comic Con and the date. So, that all of us, had, shirts for the event. And I had decided that, I was going to drive. I don't mind driving. I like the scenery. I like to, be able to see things. When you're in a plane, you can't really see anything. So, I drove, and it ended up working out because, some of us in the group had bought things, and they had either flown or, had different means of getting there and weren't going to be able to, or didn't want to fly back with that stuff. So, I took it, loaded it up with me at the end of the show, when we were done, and brought it back with me, and, was able to mail it out and get it where it needed to go. So, no, and I'm going to do the same thing next year. Trust me. I fell in love with the New York City Comic Con. I love the atmosphere. I love the city. I think I'm built for the city. Like, I love New York. It was such an awesome experience. I mean, the show itself was great. I mean, there's no way that unless you, like, hyper focus on, like, one thing, like, I was just there for Spawn, any of the artists, the writers, for Todd McFarlane, for, figures they were selling, whatever. I was just there for that. But if you were there, if you go to a con like that, a convention like that, and try to see everything, I don't think you can see everything in the 4 days that they give you. I mean, even if you're there from, when they open the doors until they close up for the night, it is huge. I feel like I barely made a dent in it. I mean, truth be told, I mostly stayed in Artist Alley and went upstairs for a couple of the panels, but, I wasn't even trying to see the whole thing. But there is definitely a ton there to see. So if you haven't been, you need to go and, experience it because it is awesome. Definitely not one to miss. All right, getting to the show, like I said, I was going to drive, and Ty reached out to me, Spawn Hunter, and said, hey, he said, it would be cheaper, for me to fly to you where you are, since you're driving, and then, we drive out to New York, than it would be for me to fly from where I am all the way to the show. And I said, of course, come on, road buddy, I'm not making the drive by myself. So, it worked out, I worked it out to, to get off work. So, I get off work. I made sure, everything was packed up. This was on, Wednesday before the show. And make sure that I'm off working time to be able to go home and, get my, personal vehicle, get over to the airport, get Ty picked up. And, we had enough time to where I kind of wanted to show him, my local comic shop. And then I don't live too far from there. So we came over here and saw my collection. And Ty is the first, Spawn Hunter is the first person within the Spawn community to actually see my collection. So I've actually had Spawn Hunter like right here. So that was really cool. He can, he came in here and had a seat. So, and checked out my collection, and then, we got on the road. So, I don't know, it was, mid-afternoon, took off, drove all the way to New York. Now, in Ty's defense, he did offer several times to take over driving, and I said, no, I'm good. I got this. So, drove all the way. It ended up that we were staying with, Adam, from Reddit. So it was myself and Ty and Jeff Monk and Adam. We were all, staying together. So I think it was like 2:30 in the morning when we got in, and we get there and, knocked on the door, wake everybody up. It's like 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. The Comic-Con starts, in a few hours, but we end up like sitting there and like, BSing for several hours until finally we look at the clock and we're like, hey, we might want to get some sleep. Comic-Con starts in a few hours. So, we did. Ended up crashing out for a bit. We get up in the morning and, we head over to the show. I highly recommend if you guys go to, the New York City Comic-Con or you go to any big convention like this, that you get your tickets like way ahead of time. Because if not, you're going to have to go stand in will call, once you get there to get your tickets. And myself and Spawn Hunter, we were in line for probably about an hour and a half. And we had got there in the morning. It was like an hour and a half that it took us to get through the line to actually get in there to get our tickets to get into the show. So if you guys plan on going this year or, to any future shows, I recommend you get online and get your tickets and have them mailed to you. It makes things so much easier and so much faster. So we finally get our tickets and, we get inside the show and, we're just in there and I'm, trying to take everything in, go around and see where everybody is. We didn't really make it down to Artist Alley the first day. We were kind of just like checking things out because at the show, Walmart had a booth set up and they were selling the figures that were out at the time. They had the Deviant figure that comes with the comic, and they had the Spawn 77 with the red and the blue outfit, and the black and the red. They had those available, which didn't make sense to me the way that they were doing it. They said that you could only buy like one at a time, but that you could get back in line and buy another one. And literally, if there was nobody in line, you could stand there and buy one, just like turn in a circle and look back at them and be like, okay, I'll take another one, and they would sell it to you. They couldn't sell it to you in the same transaction, so that was a little goofy. So, first day, not really a whole lot going on. I don't remember how late we stayed, but, we ended up, getting out of there. And then, the next day, which was Friday, we wake up and Adam breaks the news that we have no hot water. And it was awesome. It's like, it's October, so it is cold, all right? It's cold outside, and there's no hot water in his building. They were having some kind of, issue with the boiler or I'm not sure what was going on, but they had no hot water. So I took probably the coldest shower in my life. And it was awesome. I was awake. I was ready to go. So everybody gets ready. We get to the show. We're making our way around to things, and Todd, it wasn't on the schedule. The only thing that was on the schedule for that day was that Todd had a couple panels like upstairs. I think they were starting like at 2 o'clock or 2:30, but then when we got there that day, they said that they were Todd was going to be signing some books over at the Walmart booth, the one that I was telling you about that had the figures. They said about 1 o'clock, Todd was going to be over there, signing books. That's all they said. They didn't say there was a limit. They didn't say like anything. So it gets to be, I don't know, within a half hour. So we go over there and we get in line, and we're standing there waiting, and then as it gets time, before they're going to, before it's time to start, I think Todd was like in the back of the booth doing like a live promo thing for all the different figures that McFarlane Toys was having out at the time. But then once that was done, he was going to sign books, and they had said that at some point they had come out and said that he was only going to be doing like 75. So the first 75 people in line got their book signed by Todd, and that was it. So we were like, I don't know, 30th, 20th, 30th, something like that in line. We were like midway through, so we were going to get our book signed. Now, up until this point, I had never met Todd McFarlane. I've only seen him like online and things like that. Had not met him in person. And I'm not one of these people that's gonna like fanboys out. I would like to meet Todd. I think it would be really cool. But I wasn't gonna have like any kind of a meltdown. Well, before it was actually time to do the signing, he just starts going out and walking through the line, doing crowd work. Talking to people, shaking hands, meeting the fans, and he was coming down, through the line like he was like right here, like right in front of me. And different people were getting their pictures taken with him, and he was coming around to where I was, and then his PR person, whatever you call her, his wrangler, Shannon, she was like, all right, that's it, no more, you got to get over here, you got to stay on schedule, you got to do the signing, whatever. So the picture that I have here where Ty got a chance to get his picture taken with Todd, you can see me in the background with kind of like a not so happy look on my face. Well, that's because I was like so close to actually, shaking his hand and getting to, actually introduce myself, and I got cut off. So, I mean, no big deal. I was still in line. Made my way, up through the line. Actually got to, meet Todd. It's a big fan, but he's like moving people through this line, so I don't have a lot of time. So, I get my book signed, and then as soon as he was done with that signing, he was going to be upstairs for, his panel. He had like 2 panels back to back. I think one was for McFarlane Toys, and one was just, I think was just Todd himself. I don't exactly remember, but so as soon as we got our book signed, we went upstairs, and we go upstairs and we're standing there in line, and there's this guy that has this classic Spawn costume, like head to toe, like wearing this thing, and it looks so cool. So Ty and I asked if we could get our picture taken with him. He put his mask back on for the picture, but it was just so cool, that the guy made this his costume. It was pretty wicked. So there was a panel in the room at the time. That panel cleared out, so we went in there and, we were finding our seats, and we ended up sitting, I don't know, like on the right-hand side, a few rows back, we sit down. Like I said, those of us that, are in the group, it was, me and Punk G42, I think Jeff Monk might have been elsewhere, but Ty was there, Um, and Adam, and we sit down and we're waiting for, for Todd to come in, and start the panel. I'm sitting there minding my own business, all right, and Punk G 42 is, sitting all the way down to the right, and he hollers down and he says, "Hey, Tiny," he says, "do you want Wanda to sign your book?" And I look down, and sitting at the end of our row is Todd's wife, Wanda. And I was like, okay. So I go down there and I, politely introduced myself and said, big fan. Sorry for the intrusion. And she said, no, she was fine. I try to be very polite and very courteous. But she signed my book for me. So the Spawn 77 book that Todd had just signed downstairs has Todd's signature and has his wife Wanda. Now, this could be like a 1 of 1. I don't know. I don't know if anybody else got their book signed. I'm not trying to send it in and get it graded. It's just something really cool, for me to have in my collection. That I have a book that was signed by Todd and Wanda. I did ask her. I said, "Is there any chance ever that Todd is going to put out, like, the original book that he did back in '77, where Spawn, was based on, outer space and things like that?" I said, because I know that a lot of us, fans would like to read it or like to see it, where Spawn started and where he ended up. I mean, I love where he is now, but it would be cool to see, like, his, so-called, like, origin story, where the idea was, birthed. And she said, it's not really a complete book. It's just, a bunch of pages, but it's not a cohesive story. So, I mean, there's not really any chance that we're going to get anything like that. I have seen, some of those pages in some of the McFarlane books that have came out, but as far as like a whole story, we're not going to get it. So I did tell her that, I said thank you for telling him to shut up about the movie. We appreciate his enthusiasm and all the updates he was giving us, but it was getting to be, a little exhausting. So thank you for that. And I know I've mentioned this before, but as a fan, this is how he needs to treat the release of the movie, because I know he likes to talk. I know he likes to be out there in public. I know he's a salesman, and he's great at it. He's great at what he does. But all he needs to do is just once the movie is in production, once we have a trailer, once we have something that's been recorded, that's actually started. Just, put it out there. Put out there like a teaser trailer. Just say, just release it and say, check this out. Or, say coming soon. Or don't hype it up like you usually do. Just stick it out there. And I promise you, it will take off like wildfire. Just let us, spread the word. Because I think that would hit so much more than, Todd come out, and just, waving his hands about it, saying it's here. Just slowly release it. All right, so, we did that, and then we, sat there through the panels, and then, I believe it was like during the second panel, because there were two back to back. They were letting people ask questions. So, like, nobody in my group, was getting up there, and they said, go up there and, ask a question. And I did have one. I did have a question for Todd, but I do believe, I think Adam, from the group, I think he did go up there. So then I got in line behind him, and, people are asking their questions, Todd's answering them, and then it gets up to where it's my turn to ask my question. And I get shut down again. Shannon says, all right, that's enough for questions. You have to be, elsewhere. So, we got to go. No more questions. And I'm like, come on. I do still want to ask my question to Todd. So Todd, I need to have you on here one day because I have some questions. Everybody, it seems like all the interviews you do, everybody asks you the same questions. Well, I have a different set of questions for you. So hopefully we can work that out one day. All right. So, after the panel was over, I think, we went downstairs. I still don't. I think we did end up making it down to Artist Alley. Um, I do know that I think it was on Friday that I'd stopped by and met Bjorn Barron and got to talk to him. I love his cover work. Like the 3D looking stuff is wicked. I love it. Stopped by and saw Liam Sharp. Now this was before the Dark Ages reboot had came out, so I did buy a Dark Ages print off of him. And then we had, let's see, yes, we had Friday night. We all had like dinner plans, and we were going to go out to dinner. Adam had made reservations for us at a local restaurant there in New York. It wasn't too far from the con. After the panel, the group of us had kind of like split up like into like smaller groups. Some of us would take off on our own, and we always kept in touch, so we would get back together. Well, like I said, we'd made dinner plans. We had reservations, so we're all trying to coordinate and talk and say, hey, it's coming up on time for dinner. We should be heading over there. Well, at some point, Jeff Monk had lost his portfolio, like with all of his work in it. Like he's got original art in there, he's got everything, and he can't find it. All right, Jeff, I'm sure inside is like in panic mode, but he's like cool as a cucumber. Myself and Adam, we were like freaking out. We're like, oh my god, I felt sick to my stomach. I'm like, where is this thing? So Adam and Jeff are off like trying to find it. I'm going over to where we had got something to eat. We're trying to figure out where it's at. Adam says, hey, somebody needs to go secure a reservation. Can anybody do that? And I said, I'll go. So I take off walking, over to where the restaurant is. I go over there. I secure our reservation. I go in there. I mean, this place is like, it's kind of like a pub, slash bar. And, I go back there and I sit down and the waitress is like, can I help you? And I said, yeah. I said, we have a reservation. She goes, can I get you anything? And I said, I'll take a water. And she looked at me like I just punched her in the face. I'm like, okay. I said, fine, give me a drink. So I sit there and I'm nursing my drink as, people are showing up. And it ended up being, we had it open to anybody in the Spawn community. We said, hey, we're going to get together, on Friday night at this place. If anybody wants to stop by, if anybody wants to come along. So it ended up being myself. We had it open to anybody, any artists, whatever. We invited Thomas Healy. We invited, Jonathan Galapian, anybody. We did have a couple artists that said they were going to come, but they weren't able to make it. So it ended up being myself, Punk G42, Spawn Hunter, Brandon, from Mad Viking Comics. It ended up being Adam from Spawn's Universe on Reddit. Then we had Keybar showed up with his wife. Then we had Curvin Rojas. He's a member of the Spawn community. You'll see him like all over the pages. And his wife that came. And I believe that was everybody. And we sat there and we had a good time. It was a lot of fun. All right, we had a blasted dinner. All just sitting there, getting to know each other, talking about life and everything else. It was a lot of fun. But while we were sitting there at the table, I had an idea, and I'm holding in my hand probably the most priceless, coveted piece like in my collection. I think it's really cool. It was something that I just wanted to do for myself, and I plan on attending all the future New York City Comic Con, so I'll probably do this every year. if we end up, doing the dinner date thing. But I had some blank covers that I had brought to the show with me, and I had said that I wanted everybody that was sitting there that night, for dinner. I said I wanted them to sign this blank book, to sign the cover, and I said, most of us at this table aren't artists. I said, I want everybody, I said, I don't care how bad it is. I said, I want you guys to draw, your version of Spawn or something Spawn related on the cover. So I was not even trying to get, anything for free. I didn't think they would go like this crazy, but Jeff Monk did this wicked little Spawn right here in the middle of the book. This down here is done by Keybar's wife. She's quite the little artist. But, and then we have Punk G42 up here draws the little turd baby. Then there's my terrible little mark on there. But Keybar kind of stole the show on this one. He kind of took over the back of the book here. Really wicked. I was not trying to get any art for free. I didn't think they were going to go that crazy, but, and then, I was not, or Healy had said that he was wanted to join us on Friday night, but he just wasn't able to make it, so I did get him to, sign it. Thing is, like I said, we had dinner that night. It was great. We all left. I think it was when we got back to Adam's place. Jeff gets a text from Healy and says, lunch tomorrow. So I'm assuming because he had missed, tonight. So Jeff says who and where, and Healy comes back with, he says everybody, and says where. So Saturday, when we get up, we end up not going to the show until it was time to meet up for lunch. So all of us that were there, on Friday night ended up going over and meeting up with Healy for lunch, and that was awesome. That was great. I've met Healy a few times before. He's a great guy. Got to sit down and have lunch with him. Didn't pester him too much about Spawn or anything like that. We just kind of chatted. That is where I found out. That is where I asked about Sin's return. They said it was a boo-boo. So I did find that out. But we had a great time. So like once lunch was over, we headed over to the con, the convention. We got there. That's when, I finally made my way, down to Artist Alley and got with Jonathan Galapian and Daniel, because I was going to be doing a giveaway at the time, which I did, and, had them sign some books for me. And I actually bought, it's not an original page. I'm not really that big into original art, but Daniel had a it's a one of one. It's like a reproduction of a page, but like he has inked it and it comes with a COA. So when I did buy that, that was pretty cool. They had like some pins that for the Curse of Shirley Johnson, and then I typically don't mess with blind bags. I don't want anything to do with them, but Jonathan and his wife Tara had made up these blind bags where you would get a t-shirt and a Curse of Shirley Johnson pin. But like all the shirts that they had up there that you could choose from, to buy, just straight individually, I liked them. So I didn't care which shirt that I got. So, I bought one, so I could have that. And I think I ended up buying a couple other prints. So getting to meet Daniel like in person was like really cool. He's a great guy, really nice guy. I met Jonathan before. I met him at SpawnCon. I did make it around to Greg Capullo. He was there, made it to his table, and got a print signed by him. And Erica Schultz was there. So she was like, over on the other side. I made it over to her table, and it happened to be that she was standing there talking to somebody, And she looks over at me, and I think I was wearing this shirt or a Spawn shirt, and she goes, see? She goes, now that I'm doing this Rat City book, she goes, I'm attracting the Spawn guys. And I said, I'm a special kind of Spawn guy. And she goes, oh yeah? I said, I'm the crazy guy that keeps buying all of your bracelets. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, she has like a coffee page set up to where she sells like, handmade like purses and handbags, and she makes like these bracelets. Well, she makes some that are, the Spawn colors, the black, red, white, and green. And I think they're like really cool. So like whenever she posts them up, I'm buying them up, and that's what I give away. I'm actually out right now. I just gave my last one away, so hopefully she makes some more soon. But she had said, I had a chance to interview her with World War Comics, but I was unavailable that night, so I didn't get to sit on the interview. And she said, she wanted to know who this guy was that was, buying up all of her bracelets. So that's how I introduced myself to her. And, I told her that, I really liked the book, and I didn't have her sign anything, because if you guys go to her page, go to her Instagram and then go follow her other page, you can actually buy signed books like straight from her. She has another page set up to where you can to get them over there. So I already had a signed book, but she did happen to have a signed Deviant figure like in the package, like sitting on her table. So I did buy that. So I mean, it's really cool to be able to meet the artists and talk to them, and to introduce yourself. But the one person that was there, the man, the myth, the legend. It was Tom Orzechowski. All right, the guy that has lettered probably every single Spawn book like for decades. He was there, and got to stop and talk to him. Well, throughout the show, we went, and we did other things, but as the night was coming to an end, this is Saturday. I think Adam had to go downstairs and get something from that he had commissioned by Tom, or it was Adam and Spawn Hunter that had to go down and pick up something from him. Well, Tom hadn't had anything to eat, in a while, and he ends up coming upstairs because I had stayed outside, while they went to get their things because the show was closing, and Tom was hungry. Well, it just happened. It wasn't like anything that was planned. So like some of the group members got left out, but it ended up to where like Spawn Hunter had a work emergency, so he had to take off and go take care of something. So it ended up being myself and Adam and Jeff Monk. We're standing there with Tom Orzechowski, and he says, I'm hungry, and we're like, okay, we'll take you to get something to eat. So, we just take off walking, for several blocks to go get something to eat, with Tom Orzechowski. We're walking, and we're talking, and it's like a once in a lifetime experience. I mean, this guy is like, a legend, and we're getting to hear, his stories and what he thinks of, like the modern technology and how he used to, letter everything by hand, and now mostly everything is, done on computer. So we took him to, to get something to eat, and, we sat there for that, and then, he said he wanted a drink, and, I think, we were all kind of tired at this point, but I mean, how often, are you going to get a chance to go out and sit down and have a drink with, Tom Orzechowski and Jeff Monk at the same time? It was just like one of those surreal moments where like, you can't really believe it's happening, or, you're like right there in the moment and you just can't believe it. So you just sit there, and enjoy it. And it was so cool to be able to sit there and get to know him as, a person, and the guy that's, behind, all the lettering. So, every time you're reading a book, or, maybe every little mistake you find, you're like, did Tom do that? Or was that, Todd? Who knows? But it was just such a cool experience. And we didn't, I know, some people in the group got their feelings hurt, and it wasn't intentional. It was just like one of those things where, you're like in the moment, so you just, go with it. And I'm so glad that I was there for it. So I don't even remember how late we stayed out. Jeff kept trying to, kindly, like, get away because he had so many commissions and things that he needed to be working on. But, he ended up staying, and, we eventually wrapped up the evening, and, we went back to Adam's place, and, I was, trying to get things packed up because I was going to be heading back in the morning. Like on Sunday, I was going to be driving back. So, I got everybody's, stuff that they weren't wanting to, either take with them directly and load it up in my car. And, I started the trip back and, got home, and I loved every single second of it. I'm definitely going back next year. I'm not sure how, this one's going to play out, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. Hopefully, actually, this time I can actually get to meet Todd and not just like, in a 5-second passing in a line. It's definitely a great time, and I definitely recommend that you guys check it out and go experience it for yourself. I did forget to mention that Jeff did find his portfolio. It wasn't too long after I had got down to make sure that I reserved our reservation, but they started to, they were going through and backtracking through the show as to all the different places they'd been. And it just so happened that they had stopped by a table that sells, empty portfolios, and Jeff had set his down on their table. So it blended in with everything else. And once they finally got back over there, it was sitting exactly where he left it. So he found it, crisis averted, everything's fine. Everything went back to normal. Well, as normal as it can be. And there is not one single thing that I would change about our trip. I had a blast. It was an amazing time, and it was an amazing experience. I'm looking forward to going again next year. But there's not a single thing that I wish went differently or that I would change, because everything that happened, it just makes for a great story. If everything went smooth and everything was fine, that would the trip would be good. But, the no hot water and the Jeff losing his portfolio, I mean, that just makes for a great story and, a great time. And I'm looking forward to next year, and I can't wait to see what kind of craziness we get into there. That's going to do it for this week, guys. I hope you had a lot of fun listening to my crazy story from the New York City Comic Con. I know I had a blast, and I can't wait to see what kind of craziness we get into next year. Coming up this Friday is the start of C2E2. I'm going to be driving up there on Friday. I've never been there before. I've mentioned that. But as of right now, I just plan to be there on Friday. So if you guys happen to be up there, you guys happen to see me at the show, come on up, introduce yourself, say hi, and I'll give you a sticker. Now, the two Spawn podcasts that are out there, we have Regarding Spawn and Spawnography. It turns out that they have both reached out to have me be a guest on the show. So Regarding Spawn, I've done their show once before. It was a great time. Looking forward to doing it again. And then Spawnography, they have asked me to be a guest on their episode for issues 174 and 175. And I wasn't going to pass that up. So now they record a couple weeks ahead of time. So we haven't actually recorded them yet. So it's going to be probably a little while before they come out. So go over there and give them both a follow. Regarding Spawn and Spawnography. Two really great podcasts. Regarding Spawn comes out on Friday. Spawnography comes out on Monday. And I'm right in the middle on Sunday. So you definitely get a triple dose of Spawn right at the end of the week. So next week, my coverage, next week's episode is either going to be over C2E2, if I have enough content for that. If not, we might, split it up. And I do have some figures from the Series 1, all the way back at the beginning. I have some variants and some rare figures that I'd like to share with you guys. So either way, come on back next week and let's talk Spawn.
As far as I know, I'm already dead, which means I'm waiting for your sorry ass in the afterlife.